Good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's WeatherBrains episode number 775. It's the pre-show, magical time of the program, where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say occasionally outrageous things. Yeah, buddy, we are on the air everywhere. So let's get everybody online. Let's do it. Actually, first, let me get the embed code, because if I don't get the embed code, I get in big trouble if I don't do that. That's how we get it on television. Okay, embed code is good. Now let's invite everybody. It's Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving week, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you're going to have a good one, get some time off. I have worked every Thanksgiving since 1973. Wow. But that's okay, because typically by doing that, you get Christmas off. So I have no complaints whatsoever. All right, here we go. Let's get the gang going here. I know that Aubrey cannot make it tonight. She has a situation at work. I know that Nate cannot make it, but I think everybody else is going to be on here with us. So hopefully we will have the regulars showing up here in just a second. I'm obviously working at home and probably will be for the rest of the year, unless we have severe weather, which got kind of a low-end situation here Wednesday. Don't think we have a big problem with that, but the weather pattern does look increasingly active down here. But yeah, this is the first Thanksgiving I'll ever be working at home. So that's kind of cool. I mean, and we're not going to have a big gathering. We're not going to get in trouble here, but we have our two boys coming over and just us, the four of us, and spend some time together. And then I'm just going to walk up the stairs and do my thing instead of driving to work like I do every Thanksgiving. So, all right, let's see what I have not done here. I always figure out what I have not done when something doesn't work. But anyway, hope you're having a good Monday. Here comes Jen. Always timely. Jen, you're always on time.
Hi.
Hey.
It's good to see you. How are you?
Good. So you get any days off for Thanksgiving this week?
No days off. No. We some of the radio stations want stuff early, so we'll do that. And next, so I free up time, but no, I'm working every day. It's how it is. Weather doesn't stop on the holidays.
No, I was just saying before you got on the call here, I have not had a day off on Thanksgiving since 1973 when I was in high school. I've worked every single Thanksgiving my entire life, and I'm not complaining. Again, don't get me wrong when I'm saying that, because number one, it's an honor to come to work doing this. I mean, they pay us to do what's fun. And then when you typically work Thanksgiving, you typically get Christmas off. So, it's kind of a trade-off thing.
The good thing for me is I work from home, so I can do stuff. And then if it's quiet, I can go see my mom and, all that stuff. But yeah, I'm working Christmas too this year. So, but yeah, I'm just glad to be working and covering stuff and being a voice of cheer, I hope.
I'm, we've had this, she is here.
Yeah.
She showed up after saying she wouldn't.
I know I did. She's practicing on the wall right now. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, you're doing fine. Just keep it up. Yeah, just keep it up.
That's why. Great job out there.
Yeah, looking good. You keep going for a couple of hours.
She has not been on the wall since January, so I'm gonna let her feel a little comfortable and get to know that chroma key.
Get to know that chroma key. That's a show title. So we know that Nate is out. And I guess we'll get Troy on here. And Kim is, again, on maternity leave. Hope she's doing okay. Have y'all heard from Kim at all? Do we know her status?
Yeah, I thought we did. That they were doing well.
Okay. Of course, she's doing the right thing,
Maybe
staying as far away from this show as possible.
I think I may have just seen something go by on the face bag.
Okay.
Not that I ever look at the face bag, but my wife keeps me posted. She especially likes Kim's posts. They're usually pretty funny and pithy. And got Terry and Nick here. So, Terry, can you hear us okay?
I surely can. How's it going?
And we can hear you. That's good. Nick, how about on your end?
I can hear you guys just fine. Hopefully you can hear me as well.
Yes, perfect.
Ooh, nice audio.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
We get dinged in the you ever read the comments on Apple Podcasts about this show?
I'm a YouTube guy.
Asking for them.
They hate the audio quality. They say it's inconsistent, and too many people have crappy audio, and they're very finicky. And I don't blame them. I mean, if you're listening, especially in these headsets, and somebody's got crappy audio, it'll drive you crazy on a 2-hour show.
Well, if you were asking for an excellently produced podcast, that was not part of the deal.
But we, no, but that's what we want. I mean, look, it's constructive feedback. That's what we want. I mean, I tell people all the time, I don't want you to say something nice. I want you to be honest. I mean, that's the only way you'll get better. So
we get a lot of wonderful emails and things on Facebook, and I'm always the brave one to go in and look at them because I like looking at them. Some people just stay away from them.
It's not good for your mental health. I'll put it that way. Gosh, I've been attacked more, I think, in this year over issues not relating to cutting off programming on television, because people are just so prickly. I don't know if is prickly a good word? They're just
yes.
I just got. It's just strange. It's very odd times we're living in here, and it's just we need a Valium sandwich or something.
That's a show title.
Yeah,
Yes.
All right. So it actually was, because that's a JB Elliott line. I stole that from JB, and I say it all the time. But I think we're all here, so let's get the recorders going here. I mean, let's start this
here.
party.
She's ready. The star of the show is right here, ready.
Oh yeah, awesome. Is that your cat?
That's Cece. She likes to show up about this.
I hope that's her cat.
Yeah. All right.
Cece.
Here we go, and I'll be sure I got the right audio here. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains episode number 775. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is for November 23rd, 2020, the year that never ends. But it's Thanksgiving, so we should pause and give thanks. For a lot of people that listen to this show, I mean, it's amazing to me how many loyal fans that we have that listen. In fact, if you go to the chat room that is on YouTube during this, the same people are there every week. They are faithful. And so we are thankful for our loyal viewers and listeners. And we were just talking about this, Jen. You're working this week, right?
I am. Yep.
And you're working Christmas.
I'm working Christmas and New Year's. I'm just going to go ahead and do the whole thing. So, yeah, no big deal.
Do you ever get a day off? I mean,
I get officially 7 days off in a year. Officially, as an independent contractor, you don't really, I have to buy time if I want it off officially, but we do get it 7 days. But I work in spurts. So that's, you kind of work a little bit in the morning or a little bit in the afternoon, just to kind of do your thing. And that's the cool part about working from home. And then you free up time. So
you need a new agent.
Yeah.
Aubrey, will your agent take on Jen, if you think?
If I had an agent, I'm sure.
You know, I've never had an agent. I'm not big time enough to have an agent.
You need Jimmy Sexton or one of those big guys like that for you. They're spaying. Get Sexton probably.
I don't make enough to pay an agent.
And that is your show title.
Yeah.
That's the show title of the week.
Hope my boss doesn't see that one.
Yeah, we're just talking here. So Aubrey, you have a new trainee in the studio there, huh?
Yes. So my wonderful morning meteorologist is leaving, and I'm still not happy with him about this, but I guess I have to be because it's kind of a good thing. He's going to Charleston, South Carolina. So he is making a jump from we are market 173 to whatever Charleston is, which is a lot higher than here. So I'm very proud of him. I'm still not happy he's leaving, but so that puts us in a bind, and we are training a new meteorologist until we get our permanent morning meteorologist. So we're going to have a little bit of a fill-in, like a liaison, until we can hire officially for the morning position. So we're looking.
Okay, you know, we were short-staffed here for like, I want to say 8 months. And there's just not a lot of people out there. You know, it just seems like the talent pool has been shrinking and people are kind of leaving the industry. And so
I think you're right, John. You're right,
Yeah.
James. A lot of people, it is, the industry's changed. A lot of people have left the industry. You know, some TV stations are not very stable right now. Thankfully, we have a company that has been stable, no furloughs, no pay cuts or anything like that. Hint, hint, if anyone wants to come and work for us, it's a great company. But we went through the same thing last year at this time, October, November, December, and January. We were without someone at the holidays again. So it's, you know, what do? You do the best you can and you wait for the right person. I always tell my boss, I would rather do this short-staffed for a longer period and wait for the right person than to rush to get someone in here just to fill a spot.
Yeah, one bad apple in a weather operation can take the whole thing down the tubes. So that is a very wise thing to do. And we're delighted. We finally hired a young man from Dothan, Alabama, which is a smaller market, and it's a good jump for him. And he's fitting in just fine. But, you know, we just looked and looked and looked, and you need somebody to fit the culture that you have in your operation there, you know, where you can mesh and look, whenever you're doing severe weather, everybody in that weather team's got to be a soulmate, you know. I mean, you got to jive. So that's very, very good. Hey, look who slipped in the back door. Troy, I didn't see you come in here. How you doing?
I am doing well. It's Monday night and 55 degrees in Austin, so I'm happy with that.
Ooh, I see you're wearing your Office of Campus Safety official uniform this evening.
Had to go through COVID testing today on campus because I got to work the EOC at the University of Texas Police Department on Friday, and so they put us through testing every 2 weeks. And everything's fine, but so I've been kind of busy with that and trying to get into Thanksgiving break, and then next week is our last week of classes at the University of Texas for distance learning. The in-person classes have ended at the University of Texas now for the fall semester, but on distance learning classes, we are continuing for the next week and a half or so after Thanksgiving.
And did you get the big swab up your nose?
No, we're doing the spit test, which for me, someone my age, that's, you know, to sit there and have some 18-year-olds shouting at you, spit more, you know, and but I don't know. They say that test is pretty accurate and pretty good. So, but you know, if that's the least that happens to me, I'm happy.
Yeah,
so.
No problems at all. All right, Bill Murray, I'm excited. It's going to be a great show tonight. Bring in these guests. Let's go.
Yeah, James. Tonight's first guest, WeatherBrain, is the evening meteorologist at Iowa's News Now, a CBS and Fox affiliate in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Nick Stewart, welcome to WeatherBrains.
So happy to be here. Have kept me company on a lot of drives across the country chasing, so it's good to be on the show.
Well, we appreciate that. So leave some positive iTunes comments so James can look over there and be happy. You know, that's good.
Say that you love the audio quality. It's so good.
Yeah,
I've never heard a show with such good audio quality.
and with Nick's audio, you'll be true. You'll be telling the truth there. So Nick, tell us about your career. You're what, 5 years or so in the industry, and been chasing for a while. Talk about your career for a bit.
Yeah, a bit of an interesting gateway into broadcast meteorology. I went to school for meteorology at Western Illinois University, a smaller campus. I went to like OU on a tour, Northern Illinois University, University of Illinois, and I just felt really welcomed at Western. It was like a much smaller campus. So went there, did the degree for 4 years. During that time, became the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. So I really got into the journalism side of things. And that was actually where I was kind of leaning towards, was more like publication with, weather publications or writing and that kind of thing. But then a job offer came from Quincy, Illinois, KHQA. It was for a full-time photojournalist. And I love like the breaking news scene. I'm a big scanner junkie and whatever. And so I thought that'd be kind of a fun, job. I had 6 months on my lease up in Macomb still. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just fill the void for here. And then within a few months was offered a position as a meteorologist. It was weekends. Did that for 2 years and then moved on up to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I've been here since 2017 and loving every minute of it.
That's awesome. Well, we're so glad you suggested tonight's show, and thank you for being a part of it.
Of course.
We're excited to hear from you tonight. And tonight's second guest, WeatherBrain, retired last year after 45 years television meteorology, Iowa and the Midwest. He's Nick's former chief. He operates the weather website, tswells.com. Terry Swells, welcome to WeatherBrains.
It is my pleasure, to say the least.
So now you guys were and Terry, you were at, and you're still at, Nick, a Sinclair station, right? So y'all are sister station to James, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. So Terry, tell us about your career. I mean, 45 years take you a little longer, I guess, to talk about than Nick, but there's a few Emmys and things in there littering the walls along the way.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things. I basically started my career in Eastern Iowa and focused on that part of the Midwest throughout my career. So when it comes to weather in Iowa, the last 60, 65 years, I've seen it, experienced it, and done it. And so this derecho that we went through here this past summer really spurred me on. That was a remarkable storm in our state's history and something that I wanted to be a part of. And since I was not professionally on the air anymore, I had the time to do that.
Well, you called it Iowa's inland hurricane, and it truly was. So talk about the scope and impact for a minute from your perspective. You set the stage for us about how big this event was.
Derechos are not unusual in Iowa. That's something we usually experience once or twice a year, but typically winds of 75 to 80 miles an hour might be about where you top out. But this one turned into a really remarkable event. And from about just east of Des Moines, all the way across eastern Iowa to near the Quad Cities, a little north of there, winds of 100 to as high as 140 miles per hour were estimated. And I spoke with the National Weather Service team that did the damage estimates and the surveys. And there was actually a spot in the southwest side of Cedar Rapids where they estimated potentially damage as high as 158 miles an hour to an apartment complex, which is exceptional. And the thing about this storm is that typically with a severe thunderstorm, it blows through in 3 or 4 minutes and it's gone. But these sustained winds of 80 to 100 miles an hour plus were out there, and especially in the Cedar Rapids area, for up to 40 minutes time. It was just a remarkable duration of winds. That's one of the biggest things that sticks out to me.
So Nick, talk about from your perspective about it. The scope and impact. I mean, it obviously was an incredible event.
Yeah, it's something. Hopefully that's one of those career storms that you never see again. I'm 5 years into it, so hopefully you don't see anything worse than that. I was up really late that night to like 5, 6 in the morning, as I usually am. And I just kept kind of looking at the radar and seeing these storms kind of not dying like the high resolution rapid refresh, the HER model kept wanting to do. And I did a quick, meta-analysis check, saw the Cape gradient was going to form kind of right over, Highway 30, Highway 20. So it's like, okay, well, something to watch. So I went to bed, set an alarm for 10 in the morning. I woke up and saw this line well developed in Western Iowa. And at that moment, I knew that we were going to have some big problems based on some of the quick look at mesoanalysis, like really high end instability. And I kind of had that moment where like, uh-oh. So, I took a shower real quick. I ran out the door, and that was the last time I left my apartment intact. So, driving to the station, we're getting ready for what was inevitably going to be a really long day. I think the most underrated, text I sent to my news director at the time was just, hey, we might want to get some extra people on this because I think this could be a pretty high end day. And, then we're driving out to the storm, it's an hour before impact in Cedar Rapids. They issue that PDS severe thunderstorm watch. Earlier that year, I had my first PDS watch, which was a tornado watch in March. So already coming off what was a relatively active year in Eastern Iowa. And I don't really think there's a lot of people complain about the lack of warning, which is, I think, justified because we didn't expect it to be that high end of a day. There wasn't the whole, there was no warning aspect from like the national media because simply the national media didn't really cover it that well. So anyway, we were out in the storm, our storm chasing vehicle. One of the things we do during severe weather is we broadcast live. Our engineering staff at my station is so phenomenal with what they do. This creation they built, we call it the Road Warrior. It's a phenomenal vehicle. So we took it out west. We went about an hour distance west of Cedar Rapids to intercept the storm. And the idea is just to give Cedar Rapids some type of warning. We knew it was going to be high end, and we thought the best way that people would react to it would be to see it live. So we were driving, we tried to stay out ahead of it. It overran us. During that time, we measured 99 miles an hour on a roof mounted mesonet. And at that moment, the back window in our storm chaser blew out. So at that point, it got really serious. So we pull off the side of the road. We're waiting for the storm to pass. At that point, we're filling up with water, with the rain just coming in through the back window. So I made the decision to, turn off all the equipment in the car to try and save it, which we ended up doing, which is fantastic. But, my driver at the time, photojournalist Jason Meyer, he's asking, like, how much longer do you think it's going to be? I'm going from experience. It's like, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes. We're in this car for 45 minutes, taking 100 and 130 mile per hour wind gusts. The sound of it, I will never, ever forget. I've had dreams with that sound. Just the howling sound is absolutely terrifying. So, we're kind of out of touch with the station to that point. And we're kind of like, okay, is this a widespread event? Is this really localized high winds? We start driving towards Cedar Rapids, barn destroyed. We get out, get video, then another barn destroyed, a house destroyed. And we kind of realized that this is a long path of destruction. So that was kind of the moment that it really hit me like, oh, this is bad.
And so go back to that morning, you mentioned tracking, the storms coming into Western Iowa. Set the stage for us, Terry, about Iowa's geography. Cedar Rapids sort of on the eastern side of the state, but, set the stage for the geography of Iowa and where these storms came from. And, because they came into Iowa fairly early in the day, right? And then had all day to march across and lots of instability to feed on.
Very early event for winds of that nature. And what I thought was interesting too is that SPC in their first, convective outlook of the day just had a marginal risk out for Eastern Iowa. And then by the time we got to 6 or 7 a.m., they jumped that to an enhanced risk, and the storms began to form in northeastern Nebraska. And then by the time we got to about 10 o'clock in the morning, we'd finally gone all the way up to moderate. And so you've gone from a level 1 severe thunderstorm threat all the way to level 4. And I talked to some of the guys at the SPC that were on duty that day, and they said that if they were able to put another convective outlook in the middle morning hours, they would have gone ahead and actually upped it to 5 and gone with a high risk. But by then the storms were so severe and already producing winds of up to 100 miles an hour that it was kind of a waste of time to do it. But that's something I'd like to be able to maybe do in future events, is have that extra opportunity to increase the actual severity of a risk outlook. But bottom line is, by about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, it was very, very apparent that this was going to be a high-end day. And that's when that PDS watch came out, and the storms were going 70 miles an hour across the state of Iowa. They were just cranking it. And so it didn't take very long to actually cross the entire state, probably 5 or 6 hours. But the amazing thing about it is that if you were to look at it in terms of its totality, there was about a 125-mile long swath of damage that was about 40 miles wide. That would have been the equivalent of an EF2 tornado, that type of damage throughout there. Then there were select spots where we had these 140-mile-per-hour winds, which actually would equate to a Cat 4 hurricane. And that's when things really got out of line in that stretch there that kind of went through the Cedar Rapids area. And that community is 75 square miles, and 90% of the homes in Cedar Rapids had some sort of damage. The entire town was without power. 65% of the tree canopy in Cedar Rapids was destroyed. And it really blew through there. And of course, the agricultural impacts were huge in that swath that went all the way across the state.
So how long did it take to restore power in Cedar Rapids and to most of the people across the swath of damage?
Well, there were places that went 12 to 13 days without power. Most of Cedar Rapids was probably in the range of about 7 to 10 days. And that's about 130,000 people just in Cedar Rapids alone. But there were several counties in the Cedar Rapids area and surrounding region, 97 to 100% of the actual counties were without power. So it was a widespread event, and it took a long, long time to reestablish the power grid. And I think there was like 7,000 poles that had to be replaced across that swath where they were knocked out. 6 million feet of wires were down, which would go from all the way from Iowa to Orlando, Florida. That's how much wire they had to actually repair it.
So Terry, you've been doing this a long time, and derechos are not really easy to forecast. But
no.
How would you classify the forecasts on this one? Because you mentioned how the SPC was sort of keeping up all day.
Yeah.
With it from their standpoint. How about the local weather offices?
I think once they got onto it, they did a really good job. But it's one of those scenarios where these things are just not into the modeling yet, where we can see them advanced, more than 3-5 hours ahead. Sometimes you can see all the conditions there, and there's just one little ingredient that doesn't come together, and the whole scenario just falls apart. But this is one of those cases that as the morning went on, everything started coming together properly, and that one little piece never showed up. And it was very apparent then by that 10 or 11 o'clock hour in the morning that this is going to be that high-end event we talked about. And, we're getting 100-mile-per-hour winds or greater by 11 o'clock in the morning, which is pretty unusual in the state of Iowa, I can tell you that. That's a really rare event.
So Nick, take us back to some of the meteorology. You mentioned this long duration, of the extreme winds. What caused that?
Well, actually, I think some of that, the answer to that kind of lies in some of the data that we collected with our road warriors. So again, the storm chasing vehicle, we use it obviously for TV purposes, but we also have, weather instrumentation on it. During that time, there was about a 20-minute stretch. We had a 25 millibar drop in pressure. So I have not seen anything like that before. I've searched and searched and searched, trying to find some analog. So then I'm like, okay, is this junk data? Like, was it just the wind speed causing some issues with the pressure? But if you look at us driving towards the storm, we had a headwind of 30 miles an hour. That equates to about 110 miles an hour, apparent wind. And we didn't see that crazy pressure drop. So that was a true pressure drop of like 25 millibars in a very short period of time. And so I think it was just a very high-end MCV, mesoscale convective vortex, very intense air of low pressure, and just that pressure gradient was so strong. So at Cedar Rapids, we dropped, I guess in our case, we dropped from 1016 millibars to, I believe it was 992. I don't have it right in front of me. I believe it was 990. It was a very rapid drop in pressure. So I think it was very much a very small storm scale event that led to this just obscene wind threat that moved through Iowa.
And talk about the role of the rear inflow jet. What role did it play, and how did you see that?
Sure.
Can you see that on the radar?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually really obvious on the reflectivity because you had kind of like the bookend vortex, kind of where that MCV was on the northern side, rolling right down Highway 30, which is the main east-west road that goes from Cedar Rapids to Des Moines and west. And there was like that, curlicue right on that dot right there. And then you had obviously the actual bow echo south of there with a really apparent inflow jet behind it. So the strongest winds weren't really necessarily correlated with that rear inflow jet from what we looked at on the velocity and the reflectivity data. But it was very, very obvious that it supported that storm structure to rapidly strengthen the way it did. There was obviously a great reduction in the reflectivity values, which is a pretty strong sign of a strong inflow jet kind of in the blown in the rear side of that. And of course, the velocity data. It was kind of garbled there for a little while. That kind of took some time for the DVN radar to kind of line up properly. And then once it got the lock on it, I mean, there were 90 to 120 mile per hour winds blowing towards the radar. I mean, very, very evident.
So Terry, add to that. What can you add to the meteorology of the event?
I thought it was interesting too that on the apex of that bow echo there, where the worst winds were up around the Cedar Rapids region and along the line there, west and east of that a little bit, that a lot of people noticed initially there were these big gusts which came through, and then it started to subside a little bit. And I actually spoke to some people and interviewed some people for the book that I was in, where they felt like the storm was perhaps over with. And they were down in the basement and they started to come up and take stock of things. And by the time they got up the stairs, this second wave of this actually came through this. So there was almost an eye located in the center of that apex there. And so there was a bit of a lull, almost like a hurricane, to be quite honest with you. And that was the other thing that I think a lot of people mentioned was just the screeching wind. In Iowa, we don't typically see that type of a breeze blow through there very often. So when you get that up there 130, 140 miles an hour, that high-pitched whistle, that sustained sound like that was really unusual and very unique, to say the least.
So as all that was unfolding, Terry, and you were watching all this happen, what was going through your mind that day?
I think everybody was just stunned at the magnitude of it and how quickly it came in. Again, if you were up early that morning, there was no evidence that there was going to be severe weather in eastern Iowa. It was never mentioned in any zone forecasts or anything like that. It wasn't really up until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning where people started becoming aware of this. So there's very little time to prepare for it. And I think that's probably the thing that most people were shocked about, was just how fast it came to be to get to that magnitude. And nobody's seen or experienced anything like that in eastern Iowa. We have a lot of severe thunderstorms, and typically they come and they go, and a lot of people don't even pay attention, or we get chewed out for putting the warnings on the air and breaking into their shows or whatever it may be. But this was legitimately one of those 1% type storms. And I think that's one of the things you're going to see out of this derecho. And I did speak to some people at SPC a little bit about this, is that we're going to start seeing thunderstorm emergencies now. It's typical to what you would see with tornado emergencies, higher wording, and on your cell phones, there'll be an activation that comes off. And it gives people a better idea that, okay, you want to get inside when there's a severe thunderstorm warning, but in this particular case, you want to be in the basement. It's one of those types of storms. You really do need to take extra precautions.
I'm sure the Weather Service in the Quad Cities that day used the impact tags well and probably hit that, but that doesn't always get to the end user all the time.
That's true. And I think they used the 90 mile per hour tag. And that was the first time since that's been implemented that's ever been used in their warning service area there. Same thing in Des Moines. So they were doing what they were supposed to do, but you just really can't relate that to people and have them grasp how long that wind was going to last. Usually, again, it's a quick blow. This went on and on and on.
So how many people lost their lives in Iowa that day, and what were the circumstances that their situations they found themselves in that led to those fatalities?
There was one in Cedar Rapids, and this individual was out on a bike trail, and a tree fell. And then there was another one out around Des Moines. Same thing, tree fell on a house. They were on the porch. I think total for the derecho as a whole, and that doesn't include, that's other states besides Iowa, there was 4 deaths. But considering the magnitude of it, I think that was a very low number, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I know you got a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm interested, Nick and Terry, from the TV standpoint. You're so used to thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms that, are through the area, like Terry and you have pointed out, in 30, 45 minutes, and you go on with your life. What was sort of the response from the public? The view? I mean, I've got to imagine the way Terry describes it and the way you describe it, Nick, that it's just people had to be sort of in the middle of this, just unbelieving what's happening to them. It would seem like it would never let up.
I mean, I felt that personally, just in the back of that car, just trying to ride it out. I mean, I couldn't believe it just wouldn't go down. We've talked to a lot of people that, they've, as you said, you see so many severe thunderstorm warnings, and I can talk till I'm blue in the face that there was warning. I mean, there was, 45 minutes to an hour warning for Cedar Rapids. The problem is how many people actually got that warning. The severe thunderstorm warnings don't go to the WE alerts. And honestly, think about how many severe thunderstorm warnings you get. I mean, the warning fatigue is so outrageous. And I guess the other problem too is the severe thunderstorm warning just by itself doesn't really feel like it encapsulates that storm. I almost think that we should personally utilize those extreme wind warnings that are used for landfalling major hurricanes. I think that is the ticket here for better warnings, because if you hear that extreme wind, like, that sounds horrifying, and that also goes through WEA.
Well, Nick and Terry both, anyone that's spent any time here listening to me rant about severe thunderstorm warnings, we got too damn many of them. Those need to be cut back, and this is the case. I agree with Nick, Terry, in a way that use that EWW, use that extreme wind warning for these sort of things. Because I'm afraid that we may have cheapened a little bit the severe thunderstorm warnings, that when you have something come up like this is not going to cut it.
There's no doubt about it. And Nick has heard me go off many, many times about severe thunderstorm warnings. You can see him laughing away over there. I just really think that it's gotten out of hand. And like you say, it cheapens it. And this is one that was very legit and the real deal. And I'm sure there were a lot of people that didn't take it nearly as serious as they should have. So we need to do something a little bit better about that. And I think that this has caused a lot of discussion about the warning system, to be honest with you. I think it will make a difference. The other thing I was going to say too is you mentioned what happened after this event. Like in Cedar Rapids, there were so many trees and so many power lines down that it was just gridlock across the entire city. Nobody could go anywhere. It was just dead stopped until people could get out there with chainsaws and move all the debris around. So just the rescue vehicles, everything was just at a stop. It's an event like you just can't quite imagine. You expect a tornado, let's say an F3, F2 tornado comes through, it's a couple blocks wide maybe, and it might go on for a while, but this would have been equivalent to, like I said, a 40-mile wide tornado through a swath of Iowa there with this extreme damage. Just really, really rare to see something like that. I can't begin to convey how unusual that was.
Have you guys looked at the analog as far as the 2012 extreme derecho in the mid-Atlantic as far as pressure drop? Because I was here forecasting at the time, but I was not in town at the time. So when I got back, people were telling me that the wind was roaring for an hour, and I'm pulling up some of the METARs, and it's pretty much an hour and 20 minutes where you're having those high gusts over 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, kind of exactly what you guys are talking about, how you're having this hour-long duration. I haven't looked at the pressure drop from there, but now that we have two of these really extreme derecho events, within 8 years of each other, what's kind of the analog there that you guys have looked at?
Nick, you want to tackle that one or not?
Yeah, I at least it's speaking from a regional perspective. I mean, we're no strangers to derecho. I think, right. Terry mentioned that earlier. We've had a few in recent years that were pretty high end, 1998, 2011. So, we've had these high end events before, but this was just kind of on its whole other level. Part of it is I don't think we have, that I have seen anyway. I've not been able to find it. I'd love to be proven wrong because I'd love to research this and look up this more, but I have not seen any weather station or weather instrument just take a pounding from this and just see a similar pressure drop. Because I'd love to see analogs to that. The biggest thing that I know is just the wind speeds in our case were, I believe, the highest I've ever seen from a derecho. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything pushing that 140 plus mark. And, you know, we felt every 140 of that on our car.
Yeah. And again, the survey team that went out into Cedar Rapids, that apartment complex, which you're well aware of, Nick, I know you took pictures of it. They saw the damage there would equate to 158 miles an hour. But they never found that consistently enough to go that high with it. But there were several instances where the 140 mile per hour threshold was met. But it was a very, very high end event, to say the least. And things had to come together just right to get those types of winds. And
I think just one thing worth mentioning real quick, is that area that was impacted too in the southwest side. I mean, that is a fairly lower income part of town. That's also where a lot of immigrants come in. Like that was a really vulnerable population that was hit so hard. And that was really one of our biggest tragedies here. And that's honestly, to give some perspective, we kind of alluded to how the gridlock the city was. I mean, in terms of covering the storm, we were able to fan out our reporters like a few blocks. We really did not have a sense of the magnitude of this thing. I mean, it could be measured in days, because the other problem was you have everybody without power. Right. And then you have cell phone towers on backup power. Those run out. Days 2, 3, 4, we have no cell service. So, you know, one way that we do TV is live view backpacks. Those are useless now. Thankfully, our station invested in microwaves. So we had 2 microwave trucks we were able to use. But just getting these stories out was so difficult, because almost like every media outlet kind of stayed in their sector of the city that they were located, because that's where they're able to kind of move to the best.
Yeah, it even took the national media 3, 4, 5 days to even get a sniff of this. It just wasn't out there for a long period of time.
What was your setup that day? Sorry, I was just going to ask, like your temperature, your dew point, your instability. What was kind of the setup leading up to it?
Yeah.
I say it was a hot, muggy afternoon for July or early August. I mean, we had temperatures, I believe, low mid 80s. Dew points were flirting with upper 60s, near 70. I mean, it was a hot, humid day. And my biggest concern was, as I'm leaving Cedar Rapids at 11:30 in the morning to head towards the storm, which is clearly strengthening, it's still bright sunshine. So I know it's only getting more unstable. And at that point, the surface-based Cape values were 4,000 or 5,000. That's pretty uncommon for early August. I mean, honestly, one thing that really helped us in a way was the fact this happened in August. Because if a similar setup happened in late June, early July, kind of more typical for these derechos, we could have had days of, you know, upper 80, lower 90 degree temperatures. We were actually pretty lucky with the weather that followed. We didn't have rain for like 3 weeks after this hit. So a lot of roofs with damage, people were able to kind of try and cover that and do something with that. We didn't have extreme heat. So, you know, like overheating wasn't an issue. We had shelters, obviously, that we needed to break out, but it wasn't this mass scale cooling center thing that we needed. The nights were actually kind of cool, which was kind of enjoyable out in the garage.
This was kind of a late one for our area too. Typically, most of our derechos of that consequence would be in the months of June or early into July, maybe mid-July. So it was about a month past the typical time frame. And I thought that was a little bit unusual, considering all the ones that I've looked at in our past history. Most of those are going to be late June, very early in the month of July, typically.
You know, guys, one thing that I'll always remember, and I saw so many pictures from y'all's neck of the woods, you know, after this event, but the one that made the most impression on me, and maybe I'm just simplistic and it got my brain, but were the nighttime satellite pictures with the power outages. That was, it wasn't until I saw that, guys, that I realized how extensive this was.
Yeah, that's something I devoted a whole chapter on in the book. It was just such a remarkable thing for the power companies to have to come in here and repair that grid. it was entirely wiped out on such a large scale that it really took a long time to get the crews and people necessary to come in here to solve that particular issue. And that's just one of a multitude. The agriculture across the state was massively impacted. There was 8 million acres of corn, 6 million soybeans that were destroyed, let alone all the grain bins where a lot of this grain was stored in. You could drive across the state of Iowa and they're just tossed around all over the place. They're still sitting out in the middle of the field in some places. Pretty remarkable sight.
And touching on the power real quick too, I know we talked to Alliant, which is the major power provider here. I cannot thank them enough for the work that they did. They were telling us that they did about 8 months worth of work in about 10 days when it comes to repairing poles, doing wire. And we're not talking just power poles. I mean, high tension, giant towers came crumbling down. I mean, that's not something you can really do overnight. There's one stretch of major highway east of Cedar Rapids, Highway 100, and there was one of those large transmission towers that completely collapsed. And it took 2 full days just to build that up. And, it wasn't until we started getting those outer, high transmission lines into the Cedar Rapids area metro rebuilt, that's kind of when things were starting to be rebuilt finally, and power and it's slowly coming back online.
I wish more people knew that, because I think that's one of the positive stories. Always after these big storms or hurricanes, you hear, oh, the power crew's taking forever. I haven't had power and stuff. But like you just said, it took them 10 days to do the work of 8 months. That's a story that should be told across the country.
And honestly, given how active this tropical season was, we were also pretty lucky in that when it hit early August, that was like the one time of the tropical season that things were pretty calm. So it was not too difficult to get contractors to come up from Texas. I know we had people from Texas, Louisiana, Alabama. We had a lot of people coming in Florida. So that lull in activity during the height of the hurricane season really helped us out. A lot of things worked in our favor given how terrible of a situation it was.
One thing I thought was interesting too, Nick, and I don't think it gets a lot of attention, but we were experiencing a drought in the state of Iowa, particularly in the central and western parts of the state. And so the corn crop was actually very brittle, and it had matured to that point where it was, 8-9 foot high. So it was looking relatively good, but it could have used some rain. But the stalks of the corn were definitely very, very brittle. And because of that sustained wind like that, instead of bending and maybe coming back up, which often happens, it just snapped it off right at the base. And that was the end of the corn, nothing left of it.
So Troy, it was as high as an elephant's eye, or is that an Oklahoma thing?
That works in Iowa too, yeah.
I've heard that was before, Bill, in Texas.
Let's talk about, let's kind of step through this forecasting process and the messaging again, because this is what interests me. And for those that are watching, I've pulled up the SPC Outlook. Let's see, this might be the wrong, the date of the derecho is the 10th, right?
Yep.
That's right.
That was the first outlook right there. After midnight.
And yeah, hang on here. Let me go to the day 2 here. Hang on just a second. I think anyway, in fact, here, this is the day 2, but tell me, yeah, here we go.
There it is. Yeah.
That's day 2. So if you're looking at this on Sunday, the 9th of August, you got a marginal risk through Kansas, southern and eastern Iowa over to Chicago. Was there any hint in your weather office that this might be more significant? What did you say on the air the night of the 9th, just out of curiosity? What was the messaging then, or was there any messaging then?
I know that we had, we have these Storm Prediction Center products, and I know we showed the marginal risk, but I mean, how many times are you in a marginal risk, especially in August when you have those pop-up thunderstorms? I mean, there was no verbiage that we would have used to describe anything close to what happened with the derecho. I mean, I don't even know if you told us what was going to happen, I don't think we would have believed you. Just looking at the setup, I mean, you see weather conditions similar to that several times a year, but you don't really see much. A lot of times things don't happen. I will say there was one model that did okay, And the night before, I believe it was the 0Z run of the HER, it actually did a decent job of indicating storms. But again, nothing to that magnitude. So really, the communication side of things didn't get ramped up until the morning of. In the morning show, it became pretty apparent that we're going to have severe weather. By the noon show, things already happening. So the problem is, did we reach enough people during that process? We do everything we can with Facebook Lives ahead of the event. I did a Facebook Live, from the storm chasing car on the way there. I know a lot of people got the heads up that way. We're hitting Twitter. We did app alert pushes. But if you tuned out for 12 hours between 10 p.m. Sunday night and 10 a.m. Monday morning, you would have had no clue what was coming your way.
So on the air, the day of the event, when did you go wall to wall, or did you go wall to wall?
Yeah, so we actually had a little experience with this earlier in the year. In July, I believe it was July 11th, we had another high-end wind event that we thought was, extraordinary, 90, 100 mile per hour winds. And that kind of set a precedent of, okay, if we have this powerful wind, we're going to treat it like a tornado situation. So the first warnings kind of were entering our area a little bit before noon. We started our new newscast with the severe weather, a live hit from the storm chaser, another quick update on the storm. We broke away for news for maybe 4 minutes, from about 12:04 to 12:08. But then our morning meteorologist, Rebecca Coltman, she did a fantastic job just kind of stepping and be like, okay, here's the deal. We're going to stick with this just because the high end threat. At that point, we're getting a 99 mile per hour wind gust near Marshalltown, Iowa, and Albion. So it became pretty apparent that this was going to be the real deal. And
PDS watch too, Nick, was a big trigger there. When you got a PDS watch out, it's the first chance something's coming up, you go with that, and you did.
Yeah, so that came out, I believe, 11:29, right around 11:30 in the morning. So I believe we even broke into coverage for that. Did a quick update, PDS watch. Stay tuned. We'll keep you updated, yada yada, and of course, all the social hits too. But yeah, we went wall to wall starting about 12:08, and I don't think we got off the air until about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We kind of did a quick reset and then went back on at 5 for our traditional 5 o'clock newscast. And another note I just want to do, again, going back to our engineering staff at our station, phenomenal job, not only keeping us on the air, but allowing us to broadcast the days after. We had damaged the station more than $100,000. We had satellite dishes in our satellite farm that were completely mangled. We were actually the only station that was still broadcasting with our towers. They were able to keep them online over the air. So for many people, we became kind of an information source in what was kind of a desolate period of information during that time.
What was your call to action? So somebody watches you and it's noon and you're showing this line of storms. What did you tell people? This is what you need to do. How did you message a call to action?
Yeah. So, the best part about being out in the storm is us being able to showcase what's happening. So we knew based on storm reports that there was high-end 100 mile per hour winds before we even got to it. At that point, we're telling people kind of more traditional stuff, but kind of a little high end with the severe weather warnings. We're talking about, taking things off your patio, bringing them inside, move cars away from trees. I called that out on air, I think at one point too, just trying to kind of batten down the hatches for what was coming. And at one point, we're talking about 100 mile per hour winds, and this is coming right at Cedar Rapids. And we're kind of continually stating the time, like you have 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And I really hope that people kind of took what we said and took it to heart. I know a lot of people messaged me after the fact. The moment they took the storm seriously and took shelter is when our window blew out live on air. That was kind of their trigger of, okay, this is the real deal now. So, it took me kind of getting shattered with glass and cut up pretty good. But if people took it warning, even if I just helped one person with that, I'll take it.
One challenge, and then James, I'm sure you've experienced this too, is that those storms were going 70 miles an hour, if not more at times. And the sun is out at 11 o'clock, and by noon, you're going into winds that are exceeding 100 miles an hour. Kind of hard to convey just how quickly that whole mess is going to come and how, severe it's going to be. I think that's one of the biggest challenges with that type of event, was just the speed of it. And when you put a warning out, gosh, it's already done and gone in 15 minutes, typically. Now, of course, this one just kind of sat over Cedar Rapids and just kept pounding away. But boy, it went downhill fast, very, very quickly, from a very nice day to the worst you could imagine, just like that.
Well, what was it like internally? Do you use National Weather Service chat? And if so, what was it like on that chat session that day?
It was a lot of people reacting very quickly. Obviously, the feeds, we have a great group, National Weather Service here, both Des Moines and Davenport. They love chat. They use it really well. So a lot of great information coming in. Every time a wind gust would come in, we're putting that on the air right away. We're trying to get all the information. I mean, tornadoes, it's a little bit easier to kind of talk on the air. You know this, James, pretty well, that, here it is. You can kind of go along with it. Severe thunderstorm warnings sometimes can be a little bit more dull, I guess, in coverage, but this one was not. I mean, the amount of information we had. And of course, then we start getting viewer videos, viewer photos, the stuff that I was sending back. So at that point, we kind of just kept pumping out more and more content, trying to get people to really take this thing as seriously as we could. NWS chat, I mean, I work pretty well with the Weather Service offices there. My reports kind of going back to them as well. So I know they use that at times to help with the warning process too.
And let me say this, we can look back on it now and Monday morning quarterback this thing, but you really don't know when the derecho is just going to peter out and fizzle. You don't. You can look at it now and understand the dynamics and all of the data, but you don't know that at this point. There's a lot of, uncertainty and variability, and all these things are up in your mind. And people don't understand how hard it is doing live coverage with an event like this. How is the news department support? Because this logistically, this is a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean,
I will say, not only was it the management, getting everybody in, but I will say a lot of our reporters jumped right into gear, and they were sending us pictures from their neighborhood, trying to get to the station. We were able to stay on the air, which was important. I mean, at one point, if you watch our live coverage, which is all on YouTube, by the way, it's pretty fascinating stuff. At one point, you see all the lights swaying in the studio. We have like an over-the-top cam. And at that point, you hear something fall on the building overhead. Something I think came from our transmission tower, which is right above our heads, 600 feet straight up. Something fell off onto our building. At that point, they kind of took shelter in the central part of the studio. Yeah. So, it was pretty quickly, or building, I should say, not the studio. The studio's a bad place to be. But yeah, very quickly we adjusted. We were able to get resources into play. Obviously, we were already out in the field following it back in. So, we had that information source. And then really, we just kind of took that time between, I think it was about 3:30 and 5 to kind of regroup, assess our damage at our station, make sure everybody that we work with is okay. Because at that point, we had people out in the field that were doing their normal stories at that point. But everybody that was working immediately turned to derecho coverage. And, we had everybody helping with that.
James, I think it's interesting in a way. I always say that at least tornadoes have the common courtesy to remain in their path, essentially. And we all admit that tornado paths usually are not that wide. Most tornadoes are very, and here you have something that's covering what, guys? 60, 70, 80 miles a path. And I'm like James, I'm sitting there going, how in the heck do you communicate that in a way? I mean, this is not like tornado. Hey, at least you got somewhat of a point. There's no point here.
I think also something that you mentioned earlier, there's a culture that you develop, and James talked about how you have this meshing going on with the rest of your team. You want to have everybody mentally in place before this thing ever comes into your area. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to handle it, how the hierarchy works, and all of that. Then you're just going to have to rely on the messaging after that and what's going on in your experience. And having a lot of experience in a storm like this makes a big difference. And I think too, with somebody in the field like Nick, who was able to actually be out and experience it, bring that back to people, really enhances the coverage And that's like your 211 tornado coverage there. That was just spectacular. That's the way it's done. And you could tell how it was all planned and pre-planned. Everybody did what they needed to do. The roles were there and everyone performed. That's critical.
And nobody asked questions of like, should we do this? Like nobody really asked if they should come in. They just kind of did it. Everyone just kind of fell into place. You know, our meteorologist, Rebecca Colpin, she took over on the wall. Great job there. Our fairly new meteorologist, Sarah Flynn, you know, this is her first big event and she was fantastic on social media, just getting all the information out that we possibly could. Everyone just stepped up. I mean, I could not be happier with my news team. I mean, I've, you know, worked with them now for a few years. This was kind of the first time that everyone kind of really came together. And, you know, it was already a rough year for Iowa news. You had the Iowa caucus disaster, and then immediately go into COVID. And then now you have the derecho. I mean, our poor reporters, I mean, they haven't had time to stop and think or rest. I mean, they're just been nonstop since late January.
Jen, I know you've been trying to get a word in edgewise here, so let's let you have a shot here.
I'm fascinated. My heart goes out to the farmers, and Terry, you had mentioned just a little bit about the corn crop, and it was also soybeans, right, that were flattened. Was there anything at all salvageable from all that?
Yeah, there was, but there's a certain way of doing it. It's not like your typical picker that goes out there and picks the corn. It's kind of laid down flat, and before it all dries up and gets messed up, there's a way to go out there, a certain type of machine that they can cut it and try and salvage what they can from it. With the soybeans, though, they weren't as high, so they're closer down to the ground, which makes them less vulnerable to the winds. So that's the corn crop that was really hard hit by it. But I think after the derecho was over, if I remember correctly, 25% of Iowa's corn crop was then rated as in poor to very poor condition. Before the storm, you know, everybody was expecting a really bountiful year, a great harvest, but in a matter of, you know, half an hour, it's all gone, nothing left, wiped out.
In terms of acreage and cost, do we know where this ranks in terms of crop damage and historically? Was it one of the worst for Iowa?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would say so. I don't think there's anything that even compares in the state of Iowa. This will go down as the worst natural disaster in state history. Previous to that, it was 2008. And both those times, ironically, Cedar Rapids was really hard hit then. So the two worst disasters in state history weather-wise were actually focused on Cedar Rapids with the flood of 2008 and now the derecho that occurred this year.
Okay. Thank you.
For those watching, what you're seeing is some of the live coverage, and it looks like this was as the thing was approaching Cedar Rapids, and you see power flashes in there.
Yeah. There you go.
Where is this camera exactly, fellas?
So this camera is 300 feet above our station. It's halfway up our transmitter, which is right above our building. So it's 300 feet up of a 600-foot tower.
And if you go to some of the YouTube videos, you want to see some impressive stuff. There are some really remarkable scenes you would never think would take place in Iowa. It makes this look like chump change here.
And Nick, I know you got to leave at 9, don't you? So
I am working from home, so it actually I can just kind of tune out real quick, so I can just turn my camera off just to kind of let you know that I'm busy, and I can pop right back in. So
well, come back when you can, because we want to hear some more stuff from you,
right?
Yeah,
I'm seeing flying debris in this.
Yes, I mean, there are corn. I mean, when we were out earlier out in the field, I mean, there were corn stalks, like whole corn stalks flying through the air, like leaves. I mean, the debris was truly, truly unbelievable.
And again, we're watching, and again, we know that most folks listen, and I'm always hesitant to do this, but yeah, this is pretty crazy. What's this traffic cam, guys?
Yeah, so the Iowa DOT is a phenomenal resource for us. I don't think there's a better Department of Transportation in the country. The amount of resources they have available for media, for everybody to access, they have traffic cameras all over the place. And so all their cameras held up about 10 minutes into the storm or so, and then they all went offline as all the power and internet services failed. But these are the traffic cameras. And as a little bit before this actually started, Before this, we had our storm chasing coverage, and there's one cam in particular that was west of Cedar Rapids that was hanging on for dear life, trying to keep transmitting video.
And you have the same problem we do. All these knuckleheads driving. The number of cars was overwhelming down there. I mean, this is going to turn an 18-wheeler over. This kind of wind. I mean, goodness.
There's a lot of that. I think, Terry, I don't know if you have any numbers on that, Terry, but I mean, we had semis flipped over all up and down the major thoroughfare through Cedar Rapids. It's I-380. It was big problems. And then coming back on Highway 30, it was jackknifed semi, flipped over semi. I mean, it was just, this is, by the way, our sky cam, the shot that's on air right now. It's now aimed straight up because the wind actually knocked it over. I didn't destroy it, but if you look carefully, you can see just the debris flying through the air very quickly. There's leaves and debris. I mean, you can probably do some math and figure out just how fast these things are moving. But I mean, the video feeds were outrageous. I mean, everything we had.
Right. And I think the video is crucial here, fellas, because again, we all know what's going on here, but to the Joe Q public, they see radar looks like this all the time. Yeah. You know, it's a line of thunderstorms. So what? This happens a lot. This doesn't really communicate the severity of the situation where those cameras do. I just think that's awfully important.
It's really, I think for severe weather coverage in this day and age, it's imperative. You just have to do it. If you want to win the wars anyway, and you want to get the word out, that's the way to do it. And that's one of the things when I was working with Nick, that was his responsibility, was being out in the field and coordinating with him and bringing those images back to people at home. I think that's very important.
So did you two have any damage at your home?
Yeah, well, Nick, your story is a little more dramatic. Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. Basically, I lived in an apartment complex, third story of an apartment. And while I'm stuck in traffic trying to get back to Cedar Rapids, my girlfriend gives me a call and says, well, Nick, I'm okay, but we lost our roof. The whole roof of our apartment complex got ripped off. And it wasn't so much the wind damage that did so much damage to me. It was as the roof ripped off, it wrecked all the fire suppression systems and flooded the apartment for hours. And so we ended up about a $8,000, $9,000 insurance claim out of that. We lost a lot of stuff, and I have to do my 9, so I'll be right back.
Okay.
So Terry, you mentioned that it took a while for the national media to get there, but there was criticism of FEMA, criticism of the president for, his visit, criticism of the national media. Talk about how that all, the response aspect of it all.
Yeah, I think it really took a couple of days just for the local authorities to really get a grasp on just the magnitude of it. And then, of course, at that point, you have to go through the proper channels to get the word out, to get the necessary resources within the state. And then you have to apply for your FEMA and disaster aid and all of that, and that goes through the government. But I just don't think in this particular case, the overall strength of the storm was able to be conveyed until it was probably 3 or 4 days later. And then it came the weekend. And by the time it really got moving, it was nearly 6 or 7 days straight. And the fact there was no power, there was no way to actually get much out in terms of information. Cell phones weren't working for days at a time. It was a real big disruption in people's lives. And dark at night, nobody had city lights, the entire 130,000 people with no lights. Very strange concept to look out and see nothing. Got a good view of the stars for a change, I'll say that.
And so, Terry, talk about Parkersburg 2008, that tornado. That was a very famous Iowa tornado. Mm-hmm. Jen, you may want to jump in. I know you're nodding over there. You might have something to add there, but talk about that and then transition into the floods after that, because that was a terrible disaster too.
Yeah, actually, I did a book on that too called Unnatural Disasters, but there was a 3-week period there which started in late May that lasted into June, where there was a very, very active storm pattern that set up in the state of Iowa. And these big MCSs were coming through on a regular basis. But what sort of set it off was the Parkersburg tornado. And that one was on May 25th, as I recall. And wow, we don't have tornadoes of that magnitude very often in Iowa. And in fact, it had been 40 years since our last EF5. So that one really got things rolling. And then after that, this pattern just kind of wavered around, and we had these storm complexes that kept coming through and coming through. And the Cedar River, which runs from north central Iowa right through Cedar Rapids, just kept taking these massive amounts of rainfall. And all that water started coming downstream. And I remember going to a television station and saying, hey, I'd like to do a story on the actual tornado. And by the time we made our agreement, the floods had already commenced. And then we expanded that to make the book about this entire 3-week period. But that really changed the game there. It went from, a localized tornado to this flood that went all the way through eastern Iowa and down into the Mississippi River basin there. So it was the flood of all floods, the mother of all floods, as far as eastern Iowa is concerned. That was a real whopper. And the worst of all the Cedar Rapids infrastructure is centered downtown, right by the river. And the river had never been higher than 20 feet in its history over 150 years. It eventually crested at 31 feet. So it ended up 11 feet more than what it had ever reached. And nobody was prepared for that at all. Just wiped things out big time.
Yeah, I guess the forecast was for 24 feet, but it didn't matter. 20 feet, 31 feet, that was bigger than it had ever been. It was hard to prepare for that anyway.
So true. And then we had 2 major rain events back to back as the crest was about to reach Cedar Rapids, 3, 4, 5-inch rains. And the gauge finally even broke. So there was a point there where nobody really understood the magnitude of the water that was coming through there. And so it got on them. And then there was a point where even 2 days ahead of time, it was going to crest so high, there's nothing you can do at that point. They couldn't build any more walls, dikes, anything like that. You're just going to have to let it do what it did. And it was really remarkable. Some scenes like I never thought I'd seen in Cedar Rapids, that's for
sure. So tell us about your website, your blog, Terry.
Oh yeah, that's tswales.com. And I've been working on that now since 2013. I basically focus on Midwestern weather, but I put a lot of emphasis on there. And I like the fact that I can kind of get out of my box. I'm not confined to my 3-minute TV time or whatever it might be. And I can just go off in any direction I want. But I'm really into snow and severe weather, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of focus on that for sure.
I guess you got a little snow in the state tonight, huh?
As a matter of fact, yeah, it should be a couple, 3 inches by the time I get up tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I watched a train cam in Fort Madison, and I noticed on there tonight there were some big flakes coming down before the show started. So Nick, we got you back. How many minutes do we have you for?
Probably about 5 to 8 minutes.
Right now, you were chasing in 2019 on the Iowa City tornado,
yes,
and Terry was on the wall. So, and that's probably a picture of it right there.
Yes, huh? That's okay. the Johnson County tornado.
So y'all talk back and forth for a minute about that tornado and your work together on that day.
Well, I'd say, Terry, that's probably the day that, we practiced so much for. We have these mundane severe weather days. We always take everyone seriously. We don't hype it up on air, but on the backside, we want to make sure that things are together, to make sure that if something were to happen, we're okay. And so that was just one of those days where we're all just watching. We knew the potential was there. We saw some reports of tornadoes in Western Illinois, and the environment was looking pretty ripe for severe weather that afternoon, and just kind of communicating back and forth, kind of throwing ideas back and forth. And we kind of ended up on the storm as it was kind of starting to form.
I don't think there was even a watch out, was there, for that storm?
Not before the tornado happened. Then they should watch. Mm-hmm.
And that's a case where you have to rely on Nick's experience out in the field and his chasing experience over the years. He got himself in the right position and put himself on the right storm. It's crucial to have somebody out there that you can rely on. I mean, I'm pretty busy in there, and it's difficult for me to do a lot of analysis when I'm standing in the screen like that, but we anticipated the whole scenario, and we were able to watch it drop down. And boy, that was an experience like no other, and I'm sure one that James relates to very well.
Yeah, we had it was happening in the evening, which is kind of more helpful because you had more time to kind of talk about the severe weather threat. I think 5 o'clock show, we're kind of out just live, kind of talking about the environment. It was warm, it was humid, it was unstable. You had the southeasterly wind, so the wind shear was starting to ramp up a bit. 6 o'clock show, we have live shots, outside the storm by main weather at about 6:15. We had the big wall cloud on air, and that's kind of what we all knew, like, okay, this is kind of the storm that's probably going to do it. And then we broke into coverage, I think it was about 6:40-ish, something like that. And then we just kind of covered it as it headed towards Iowa City. And I know actually the National Weather Service in the Quad Cities were tuned into our video, and they were kind of issuing warnings based on our video and our live reports into NWS chat as well. I believe, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know. I don't want to step over their toes there, but I know they were using some of the information on whether to issue certain warnings or not.
Yeah, and they were about ready to pull the trigger on a tornado emergency for Iowa City, which is a large metro area there. And I think if it would have cycled maybe 2 more radar sweeps, they would have done it. But fortunately, just before it got to Iowa City, it started to dissipate, and it lifted a little bit there and avoided that whole problem.
So I've got a famous book in my library, but I couldn't put my fingers on it. It's not one of your books. I got to get all 4 now. I ordered this recent one. So when am I going to get it, Terry? When is this thing going to come? Is it going to come to be
expedited just for you, Bill?
There you go.
I should probably mention the fact that you can get the book at derecho.com. That's where you can go to purchase it.
DerechoBook.com.
It is in pre-sales currently. It's going to be published next week. If you were to order it by December 15th, you will get it by Christmas. So there's your Christmas gift right there.
Yeah, as long as you don't write ballad on the outside of it, it'll probably get it.
Now is it derecho.com or derechobook.com?
DerechoBook.com.
I was going to say derecho.com. That's a pretty good website, James. How'd you miss that one?
So derechobook.com.
So this great book, Tornadoes of Iowa, I grew up with this book. I think I forgot to take it back to the library back in like 1974. And it's still in my library. Well, I had to pay for it.
Yeah.
But I mean, talk about some other famous Iowa tornadoes. I know Jen's starting to get all excited. So Jen, you jump in anywhere. You got some input too.
Yeah, well, for me, growing up anyway, it was the Charles City and Owine tornadoes that I distinctly remember. This was in 1968, and there were 2 EF5s within 30 miles of one another, essentially on the ground almost at the same time. And they were, seriously violent tornadoes, biggies, and quite a few fatalities from that. And then, as I mentioned, we went another 40 years before the next one came through, which was Parkersburg. So those are probably the 3 most recent ones that caused a lot of havoc in the state of Iowa, for sure.
Jen, any famous Iowa tornadoes you've written about that strike a chord with you?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now, actually. Nick may not know this, but he's actually embedded in a video that he did, a 10-year retrospective is on our summary for Parkersburg. So we have a Parkersburg summary. Yeah, he did a great overview of that whole event. The one that stands out to me is Ryan, Iowa, August 12th, 1974. We actually had a lady who, her son had just been born a couple of days around that time, and it hit her father-in-law's farm is where it touched down, and so she actually sent us photos and told us her story. And so I did not have that tornado on Tornado Talk's website until she told me about it, and so we wrote that for August 12th. So that one kind of stands out to me a little bit more.
That was an EF4, so it was a pretty significant tornado. It was one of those rare ones that went northwest southeast. So it was a little bit later on in the year, but definitely got things rolling there pretty good. But I don't think it was on the ground for a particularly long period of time, maybe 10 miles, something like that. But while it was hot, it was doing it.
One that we have that we're going to write. I'm sorry, James. One that we're going to write on is Pomeroy. 1893. We're going to tackle that one with the crew. We found a book that we need to go through, and it's highly detailed. And so we were going to write something. We're like, oh, we're going to hold off on this one because it's going to be us really meticulously going through it. And as Bill knows, we like to do that. We're very detail oriented with our stories.
The chipmunks will be working overtime on that one.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the Comanche one, have you heard of that? That was
the Comanche
around there.
one,
Yeah, that was another big one, but long time ago.
Yeah.
Was that a windstorm or a tornado? Was it?
That was a tornado.
Was that?
Yeah.
Troy and I were just breaking into the business back then.
Me too.
I'm sorry, James.
Yeah, I can't hear
you. So you mentioned Iowa's no stranger to derechos. The name was actually coined by an Iowan, wasn't it, Terry?
Gustavus Hendricks. Yes, back in the 1880s. And he was attending the University of Iowa. Actually, he was a professor there. And he's the first guy to set up the weather service in the state of Iowa. And so he had an observer grid across the state. And he actually was able to plot a significant derecho, came up with the concept that, this wasn't a tornado, these were straight line winds. And then he called it the straight blow of the prairies, which is another thing I talk about in the book here. But bottom line is, he made a very big distinction. There's tornado damage and there's derecho damage, and he wanted a term specifically for that. But it kind of languished for about 100 years, never really took hold until some papers were done back, I don't know, 1980s, something like that.
Someone at the SPC, James, sort of resurrected it again, right?
Just Bob Johns.
Bob Johns, cool.
Yep, yeah. Well said.
Well, James, I've asked so many questions tonight. This has been fantastic. I'll turn it over to you now and let you ask some good ones.
I got to talk with Terry about life on the other side. Yeah. So so for most of us, like Troy and me and people of this generation, we are on the verge of that. What's it like on the other side of television when you got, your own business, your own time? What's the good? What's the bad? What's the ugly?
Well, it's a little slow compared to the life you're living now, I'll tell you. I sometimes just don't know what to do with myself. I'm feeling like I should be getting ready to go into work, or there's a storm that's developing and I need to be on it, or organizing something. But, the bottom line is the book keeps me involved. I had to do something. I really wanted to be a part of that storm because of its impact that it's going to have on state history. And I felt it was very important that I do something. And so that's what I focused my last 3 months on. After the book's out now, I'm going to have to figure something else out. But it's a really slow pace compared to what you're doing now.
So you were in the business in television for over 40 years. What was your highlight? Some of the fond memories of those 40 plus years.
Well, I would have to say the Parkersburg Tornado was probably one of them, in terms of an event that could really do a lot of devastation. That one was beyond belief and life-threatening. But there's a lot of things that come and go over the years, and I've always thought about that. What was your big event? And I can't say that anything surpassed that one, but the floods of Cedar Rapids in 2008 and that event together, that 3-week period, was probably the worst in state history in Iowa. So I'm glad that I was able to be a part of that and be involved in that in some way, shape, or form.
Biggest forecast bust in your career?
Oh, those are always snow forecasts. Those are the ones that get you in trouble. I have found, though, that over the years, the best thing to do is if you do run into that scenario and you do make that mistake, you might as well just get right on it and admit it and say it's over and done with. I blew it. And people will forgive and they'll forget. They'll give you a hard time about it. But as you know, you got to move on. You just can't look back. It's just push. Next event for sure.
Best news director you ever worked for?
See,
these are the kind of questions I ask.
When I think back at the amount of news directors that I have worked for, there's probably been 35 or 40 of them, I'm guessing. It's close to 30 for sure.
Yeah, they come and go real quick in this business. For those that don't know, I mean, it is I actually had the same news director for 20 years. That's like unbelievable. That is an anomaly. But typically they come and they go. They come and they go, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess when it comes down to it, there's probably nobody that I would specifically lay out on that list right now. But I've learned a lot from each and every one of them. And I don't mean to sound diplomatic about it, but they all have their different twists and their turns and their way of managing people. I think the biggest thing for me is trying to understand them and learning what it is that they want and how to achieve their goals. You know how that is? It's it can be difficult. We don't always have the same idea.
Your most frustrating moment with a consultant?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. I think the thing with the hyper-local deal really got me going for a while there. I wasn't allowed to show anything outside of the state of Iowa for a bit there. And you know how weather is, it just doesn't start and end in Iowa. You want to tell a story, and if you can't show where the cold front is or what the temperatures are out there, that part really, really frustrated me. I fought that one really, really hard over the years. And I'd kind of break down maybe for 2 weeks and do it like they said, but I'd keep inching back and, 3 weeks later, there's that North Dakota map again.
So my very first experience with a television consultant, you'll never believe where it was. Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Oh, yes.
Frank Maggid and Associates.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I guess that was their worldwide headquarters in Cedar Rapids. I don't know, but I was flown up there. I was flown up there, and this was in 1979. This is embarrassing. This is how old I am. Okay, so they flew me up there, and it was very good for me. I'll never forget this. I talked with a consultant for about 30 minutes, just small talk. We were just talking, and the whole time they were recording. There's a camera recording that conversation. And so they played back the conversation with the consultant, not knowing there was a camera on, just me and the lady talking. Yep. And then they played me on television and said, "You are two radically different people. Why are you one person here and you're somebody else here? You have to be real." And to this day, I will be thankful for that. That was very eye-opening to me. So I've had some frustrating moments with consultants over the years, like everybody, but at the same time, they can be very helpful. And that was a really good thing for me. I think for me, the worst ever was I was in Texas, and this consultant, he came up to me and he said, "Nobody really cares about the weather. To win, it's map colors." And I thought the guy was joking. I honestly thought this is a Saturday Night Live skit. This guy's just pulling my chain. No, he was being serious. And then he said, "The second thing you need to learn is hand gestures." He gave me a paper with 30 hand gestures, and they all had numbers on them. And he said, "You should rotate odd numbers one night, even numbers the other night, like a finger roll." And it's just like, I wanted to give him my own hand. Yeah, I wanted to give him my own hand gesture after that deal.
Yeah. Sounds like a scene out of Apocalypse Now or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make some of this stuff up. I mean, it's just
you can't.
Bizarre.
And I think you're right. I think one of the first things that you eventually learn if you're going to be successful in this business is that you can't please everybody and that you do have to be your own person. There was guys that I watched when I was younger who were my idols in the early days. And of course I wanted to be like them, but I wasn't them. And it took me a while to finally realize that and find my niche. But you just need to be yourself and your own personality. And usually if you're honest, sincere, and you work hard, that's going to carry you through, I think.
Exactly. So we have to take a break. And by the way, for everybody on the show, we have a hard out for a while because the equipment that is putting this show on the air also gets me on television here in about 40 minutes. So let's take a quick break for Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We've got Jen with This Week in Tornado History, and we're going to come back. Well, hopefully with some email from Aubrey, if we can. Aubrey might have dropped off. I think she had to go. But if that, we'll do Picks of the Week. We'll do Weather Roundup and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook. This morning, I got to visit with 60 fourth graders at W.G. Pearson STEAM Elementary School in Durham, North Carolina. You probably heard of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. That extra A in there is for the arts, which is vitally important to building good scientists and engineers, especially at the elementary level. But that's a topic for another time. We met virtually, of course, and it couldn't have gone better. Yes, 69-year-olds were actively engaged and asking really good questions. Like I said, those kids had great questions. And here's a couple. One student asked, if the Earth rotates on its axis as it moves around the sun, why doesn't the moon rotate as it moves around Earth? Well, actually it does. It just doesn't look like it from here. The moon spins on its axis, completing a rotation once every 27.3 days. It also takes that same 27.3 days for the moon to complete a trip around Earth. Because those orbital and rotational periods are the same, we always see that same side of the moon. This is because of gravitational or tidal locking. See, the Earth and the moon, they tug and pull on each other, slightly changing their shapes. That change in shape changes the distance between the Earth and the moon, which also changes that gravitational attraction. You do this over a couple of million years, and this tends to slow the rotation of that smaller body, the moon, down to the point where they're tidally locked. But the question that warmed my meteorological heart the most was, is it cold on the moon? The answer is, it depends. Certainly not on the lit portions. Near the equator, that temperature swings from 250 degrees above zero down to 200 below zero. The temperatures can get even colder as you get closer to the poles, where the sunlight is less direct, even during a full moon. That huge variance comes from the lack of atmosphere to hold the heat in. Looking at data returned by the early Apollo lunar surface experiments left by Apollo 11 astronauts before heading home, temperatures at that landing site were in the upper 40s when they arrived. 8 days later, when the moon reached full phase, the temperatures were up into the 150s. But as that terminator, the line between lit and unlit portions of the moon, passed over the Sea of Tranquility, the bottom started to drop out of the thermometer, plunging quickly into negative numbers. Elsewhere in the sky, on Wednesday, November 25th, look for the bright planet Mars to cozy up with the waxing gibbous moon. Look above the east-southeastern horizon as evening twilight ends. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a devastating F4 tornado made its way across 5 North Carolina counties on November 28, 1988. It is one of the strongest tornadoes on record for the state of North Carolina. The twister began at 1 a.m. Eastern Time in Umstead National Park in the northwestern part of Raleigh. It ended almost 2 hours later, 2 miles northwest of Jackson in Northampton County. It had an 83-mile track that was almost continuous. Tragically, there were 4 fatalities. 2 children were killed in Raleigh, 8-year-old Janet Barnes and 12-year-old Pete Fulgham. Near the Nash-Franklin County line, Leroy and Mary Alston were killed in their mobile home. Per the National Weather Service, the strongest damage, F3 and minimal F4, occurred along a 4-mile stretch extending northeast from U.S. Highway 70 to 4 miles east to the Raleigh-Durham Airport. Numerous businesses were destroyed, including a Kmart. Overall, 426 residences and 78 businesses were destroyed, and over 2,000 residences had some degree of damage. We have a full summary about this event and many more at tornadotalk.com.
Thank you, Jen. Let's do a quick weather roundup. Is the hurricane season over in the Atlantic Basin? Are we done? Is it any more named storms? Anybody want to?
I think
the
we
system
are.
And I say stick a fork in it. It's done,
James.
So
then there'll be 3
up,
in December, probably.
Exactly. Yeah, and 1 in January.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but will that be in this season or next season? I guess that'll be next season.
So what we wind up with, 30 or 31 named storms? I lose track.
30, I think.
Okay.
723.
Yeah.
Yeah. 723 named storms, but no, good riddance. So looking ahead here, Troy, what's happening down in Texas? You got some wet weather coming in there in a few days?
Yeah, and it's good because we have, since October 1, barely any rainfall in Austin. We've fallen into serious drought here. And the good news is we have a very progressive weather pattern. Front moving in again. We had one yesterday. We'll have one again tomorrow night into Wednesday morning. And those are kind of, they're not much to them, not much unstable air ahead of it. So it'll go through with the wind shift. But on Friday, about the time the University of Texas plays Iowa State at 11 a.m. here in Austin, Texas, we will be dealing with a very dynamic system that I believe will give us our best chance of rain that we've probably seen in 2 months. And models, especially the ensembles, have gotten a little more wet with this, but even QPF from the National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center, James, is going for 1 to 2 inches of rain around here. And folks, that'll be the most rain we've seen since September. So while I sit at that ball game on Friday, as much as I'd like the sun to be out, in a way, I'm hoping for the rain. We seriously need it. 56.5 degrees here in Austin, and the skies right now are become partly cloudy. A few clouds have shown up in the last little while.
Okay. We have the biggest football game of the year in our state Saturday, the Iron Bowl. That's Alabama versus Auburn. Typically, I would be at the stadium, but for the first time in 10 years, they're trying to get as many people out of there as possible. Yep. So I'm doing the work here and doing the, stuff on the jumbotrons on this green wall back here at the house. So, but it looks like it might rain at that game. The same situation you've got. We'll probably have some rain on Saturday and then maybe a heavy rain event or a strong storm deal on Sunday. And I note that we've got, Kim is not here, but just north of you, Troy, there's a risk of severe storms tomorrow in Oklahoma.
Yeah, up north. And then this second system on Friday, they're not outlooking it yet, but the forecasters at SPC have at least made mention of it in the discussion that they feel like nothing is there to satisfy the percentage yet for end of the week. But I think Friday into Saturday could be interesting with that storm across the southern U.S.
Let's bring in Jen real quick. Her AirPods are dying. We have a crisis here.
They make that little weird, when they go.
That little weird noise. That
yes, it's getting on my nerves. I don't know what's going to happen when they go.
Then they just go. So you can't hear it. She'll be in better shape then than you are now because you can't hear it.
In the whole show. Exactly.
So while you can still hear us, quickly, weather in Ohio. You had some snow up there in parts of Ohio, didn't you, yesterday?
Yeah, northwest of us, and they just died. And so I don't know if you can hear me. But yeah, northwest of us, we had some just chilly today, rain coming in probably over an inch here in central Ohio with this system sweeping on in, but then quiet for Thanksgiving, which will be good. And I'm watching, we have a lot of radio stations in Kansas and Missouri, so that's going to keep me hopping next couple of days, kind of watching that trek on through. It's some of the highest severe threat we've seen in a bit for the central and southern plains. So I'll be watching that close.
My advice is to charge them very quickly with this little device right here.
I tried. It didn't work. I have it.
Mine charge real quick. I mean, and what I'll do, I'll pop one out and stick it in there while the other one's in and just kind of alternate them. So maybe
at least y'all are advanced. I mean, if I have earphones on, they have something. Well, look at Nick. He's doing the right thing. You use the hardwired stuff. Okay.
Yeah. The batteries don't run out on the wired phones. So Terry and Nicholas, what's happening in Iowa in the next few days?
Oh, it's everyone's.
Snow tonight.
Go, Terry.
Yeah, that's okay, Nick. But yeah, we're going to get a little system that's going to bring some snow tonight, and then tomorrow everything changes over to rain, and it should warm up a little bit, but it's going to be a real sloppy mess. But you should be getting close to the snow now, Nick.
Yeah, it's not too far away. I was looking at the GLM on Go 16. I think there may have been a lightning flash. There might be some thunder snow trying to
thunder snow.
But it's everyone's favorite transitional snow event with temperatures at 32, 33 degrees, the most fantastic things to forecast. So we're hoping the model consensus wins out here, and we're calling for 1 to 3 in Cedar Rapids tonight and early tomorrow morning. So hopefully not a too dicey of a morning commute, but the way things go here, people like to zoom every time snowflakes fall. So
they like to what? Zoom
down 380. It's usually you can, every time it snows, you're always going to get at least a few wrecks.
You're lucky, Nick. At least they know what to do. Here in Austin, it's like we've never seen snow before in our lives. Let's run off this bridge while we're at it.
Could be worse.
Everybody south of the Mason-Dixon line is the same thing as in Austin. So, all right. Well, let's see. Jen, can you hear us? Or are you still out?
I can hear you.
Oh, well, good. Well, I was going to say, let's do picks of the week again, because we have a hard out for a while. So let's start with you before your earpods die again, or AirPods, whatever these things are called. So what is your pick of the week?
So I got on the National Weather Service Des Moines summary for the derecho, and they had a video out of Huxley, Iowa, of the winds and trees falling everywhere. And the winds were 80 to 85 miles per hour. Just watching that at 80 miles per hour, I can only imagine what it was like with the 120 to 130 up to 140 or higher, and how it was for Nick sitting in his car. I can only imagine, but just watching that video and how amazing it was to watch the trees falling everywhere. So just a kind of little taste from that summary. I was looking at some of the corn crop pictures as well, and they had it, a few of those in the soybeans as well. So it's a really good summary that they put together. And it looks like a lot of the Weather Service offices have some really great summaries from that event.
Awesome. And Nick and Tara, we're stalling for you guys. You have to come up with a pick of the week here. So we're all going to go first, and we'll come to you, something that's related to weather. And again, all of these picks will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. My pick, it's a piece about Tom Skilling. And I would assume everybody here knows Tom. And, Tom has struggled with weight. And he's been very open about that. And he knew that this was going to kill him. And he has gone on a program to reduce his weight through some surgery and through diet and exercise and everything else. And he says he's a different human being. He's lost 110 pounds. And it's a very interesting read. And I really appreciate his openness and willing to share about this, because so many people struggle with weight. This is not a Tom Skilling thing. This is a global problem. And I think the fact that he's open, kind of like Ginger Z is open with her mental health struggles, he's open with his weight struggles, and it's going to help other people. So again, that will be my pick of the week. It's Tom's piece on how his life has changed over the past year or so. All right, Bill, you got a long one, so let's just flow to you here. You got a 3-hour pick of the week?
Yeah, 3-hour pick. We're going to stay late tonight,
great. But we'll be here we'll be here till midnight.
Won't take quite that long. Troy's waving goodbye already.
Good night.
No, I was lucky enough to get a Tempest weather station. They sent me one, and I, wanted to put it up right, cite it correctly, and I did that this last weekend, and I'm really impressed with it. So I wanted to tell you about it real briefly, because I know it's Christmas shopping season, and if you've got a weather enthusiast on your list, I think this is a worthwhile opportunity for you to get them something. It is a little pricey, but after having had it up for a week and observing it real closely, I can say it's a breeze to set it up. The data that comes out of it is fantastic. You got air temperature, dew point, humidity, wet bulb, pressure, all these things. I've checked them out. They're very accurate. Wind speed, wind direction, gusts. It's got brightness and solar radiation, UV index, all these things. The only thing I really didn't like about it at the beginning was that I couldn't, I didn't have an archive of the data on the app. The app is really good, but you really couldn't go back and see the data. But I found out that through If This Then That, the IFTTT app, you could actually have this log to Google Sheets every 1 minute. So I've got 1 minute data for the past week, and that's really been fascinating to have that. But you've got also lightning detection within 40 kilometers. You can tell rain start times and things, get alerts to the app. So I'm really impressed with it. So I want to thank the people at Tempest for sending me one. Troy would like one. I know Jen would like one. So send to everybody. It's like Oprah. Send to everybody.
Everybody gets a weather station.
That's right.
Hey, Bill.
Yes, Troy.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
I don't know your situation there at the house, but any problem with sighting? Were you able to sight it okay?
Well, as good as I could, Troy. We live kind of in a little hollow, to use a Southern term, I guess. Between a big hill to the back and a big hill to the front. But I was able to get a sight on the front that I'm pretty happy with, and I think it deters burglars too, because I think it's a security camera. So, nothing wrong with that. But I think it's in a great site from what I've seen so far. It's where my Bloom Sky was located, and I was pretty happy with it. And, other than probably not getting the best wind readings of all time, it handled the wind gusts last night with our frontal passage pretty well. So I was happy with that.
Yeah, I thought about the same thing, because I have, I love the Davis units. And I have one here on the 25-foot mast out back. But I've just thought about this because I like no moving parts.
Right.
and that sort of thing. So I wanted to kind of look at the tempest. That's cool. Thanks for mentioning that tonight.
Yeah, I'm anxious for some rain so we can kind of see how the rain gauge works. Maybe James will bring me in some rain here on Friday so we can test
see
it
what we
out.
can do here. Troy, what's your pick of the week?
Nah, you can skip by me. It's been one of those weeks again.
Foghorn
so give me the
time.
foghorn.
Whoa. Wow.
That puts the pressure on Terry and for Nick to get it done here in just a couple of minutes.
Right, let's go to Nick. He's got to do some television. Nick, what you got for us?
Sure. I guess I'll shout out it's iowastormhelp.com. It's this community that came together to kind of help raise money and funds and supplies for people that were so heavily impacted by the derecho. I mean, I was pretty lucky to have the friends and everything that I had to go to when I lost my home. I had, some place to go. A lot of people unfortunately don't. And I had renter's insurance. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't. So anything that you're willing to give for the holidays, that would be a great help. I know they're trying to get Thanksgiving meals for people. So again, that's iowastormhelp.com.
iowastormhelp.com. And again, these links will be up on weatherbrains.com. All right, Terry, what you got for us? Give us something good.
All right. Well, it's not a link, but you mentioned Tom Skilling. And so I think I'm going to tell you my Tom Skilling story, if that's okay.
Go.
Okay, good enough. So back in 2010, I go storm chasing for a week with Tom Skilling. He's never seen a tornado, neither have I. So we both work for a television station owned by the same company. So I contacted him and we worked it out. So we headed out to chase tornadoes. First day we're there, we were in Waukita, Oklahoma, tracked down an EF3 tornado. Got to see that. That was fantastic. That was, the excitement right off the get-go. But later on, 3 days later, we're way down in the southeastern tip of Kansas. And we're in some godforsaken place. I mean, we're in nowhere land. And we have their live sat truck. So we do the weathercast out there and it's a 10 o'clock show, So it's late at night and we're hungry. So we're driving around trying to find a place to eat. Nothing to be found, absolutely nothing. So we see a little place there that was open earlier and had a couple lights on. So Tom gets out of the truck and he goes and knocks on the door. And some lady comes to the door and he says, hey, we're hungry. We were just wondering if you might have anything that you wanted to get rid of here. We could catch a bite to eat. Oh my God, Tom Skilling, yeah. Oh, hi, how you doing? You know how Tom goes. So they sweep us all in. There's probably 10 of us at least. They open everything up. They bring us out pizzas, pitchers of pop, pitchers of beer, hamburgers. I mean, you name it. So we're all out there scarfing down. And I think we ended up leaving the place about 1 o'clock in the morning. And we were stuffed and we were happy. And Tom, like you say, at that point in time, didn't miss a meal, was very much in a happy state. I'll tell you that. But we owed him for getting us our meal that night in particular. That was a night I'll never forget for sure.
I think that's one of the best WeatherBrains stories ever.
Yeah, it is. Tom is like the Elvis of weather, I mean, imagine Tom knocking on your door saying, I'm hungry. Have you got food for me and 9 of my friends back here?
No problem.
Come on in. Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, any show notes here before we wrap it up? Because I got to go.
No, what night do you want to do the end of the year show, James? Did we decide
with Greg?
Because I need, and I'm going to try. And can we do it at like a 9 in the morning or something? What's if that's possible?
Yeah.
If it's the end of this year, I'm going to be drinking. I'm going to warn you about that.
I'm going to Troy's house.
That's a show title. No, I think we ought to do it like maybe the morning of the 22nd, like that Tuesday morning or something. Yeah, right. Tuesday the 22nd.
That's
Greg Carbon's Meteorological Memories, the look back of the year. So that'll be good. All right. Well, let's wrap this thing up because I do have to go. WeatherBrains is typically on the air every Monday night at 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. Live.bigbrainsmedia.com is where you can watch it. But we know most of you listen. And even if you hate the audio, we still love those Apple Podcast comments. No, love us, hate us, just drop a note in there. And if you want to get us by email, it's email@weatherbrains.com. Aubrey will be back next week with a double email segment. And weatherbrains.com is where we've got the show notes, so all the picks of the week and everything else. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Nick and Terry, thank y'all. Y'all were great.
Thank you so
great
much.
Show tonight.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Nick. Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you all very much. Y'all have a great week. Okay.
Did you tell JP that they love his music, James?
Yeah. Ryan did that one.
Oh,
yeah.
Ryan did that. Okay, good.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Well, all right. Y'all
Hey,
have a good
thanks,
week
Nick.
now.
Yep.
Thanks,
Absolute
Nick.
pleasure, guys.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for a great show.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
you all.
happy
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you,
Stay safe, stay
everyone.